Hi, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Deeper Into Him. And today I'm joined by Philippe Lewis, and we already regretted not pressing record right away because the second we got online, things started flowing. Just to give you a brief introduction, this man was introduced to me by several people, and they all told me that I really had to get to know you, have a deep understanding of the masculine and feminine, that you just are a man of deep knowledge and wisdom. And so from what I gather, you are a life coach and an event producer, but in a second, I'm going to let you explain more about that. And I've just had the pleasure of interacting just a little bit already with you on Facebook. And I'm just so impressed with the level of conversation that you are able to have there. You're also, you're saying the things that not everybody is courageous enough to say. And I really appreciate your input everywhere. And I've learned so much from you in just the brief period that I've known you.
I hope to do the same with you.
We'll see. So, let's already dive in. I would love to just hear your story. Who are you?
All right. My name is Philippe. I basically started out as an event producer. I actually used to be a software engineer, very much in my head, day in, day out, trying to make computers do things. That naturally they don't know anything. They're tools. And so in learning how to make computers do things, I also realized that this wasn't really my calling. I wasn't feeling the deeper connection, the deeper human connection. So I started studying humans. And part of the reason I was doing that is because my experience with women was, because I grew up mostly a geek or mostly a nerd, my experience with women was virtually non-existent. I did have a few girlfriends, and part of the story is that the girlfriends that I had right from the get-go were girlfriends who had a lot of trauma and abuse in their history. So that for me, when I was 17, with my 16 with my first girlfriends, who had deep trauma, who had incest in their family history, and for me there was a realization that it was possible for men to do bad things like this. And that sent me on a 30-year journey of misandry, if you want to call it, a journey of hating myself or hating who I am, and recovering from that, doing all the learning that I could do in order to prove that I wasn't the kind of person that I could become, or that some men have become. And so I did this whole journey, and now I'm 48. And I'd like to think that I know what it's like to be a safe man, or a safer man, which doesn't mean safe by any stretch of the imagination. Before men and women were humans, before we're humans, we're animals. And our inner animal requires, and I mentioned this before you start pressing record, requires some level of primal intelligence to fully engage with our animal in a way that doesn't allow the animal to be out of control. Uncontrol is different. Uncontrol is, okay, here's the sandbox. Here's the place where you can ravish a girlfriend, but you don't want to go too far because you don't want to hurt anyone. You want to stay connected to her heart. But she desires that kind of intensity, and you desire that kind of intensity because there's primality inside of you that calls for it. And if you look at most mammals having sex out in nature, it is not a beautiful lovemaking experience. It is usually short and rough, and it's sometimes really painful. Now I'm not advocating for that. I'm advocating for the full integration of the primal, the emotional, and the somatic, the body, the heart, and the animal. And if you integrate all three of them, you can actually create very intense, very pleasurable, and very very life-changing and transforming experiences, because it takes us deeper into the animal in a way that is safe enough for our hearts to feel like, okay, now we're staying connected during this experience, and it allows our body to feel that intensity and feel all the good chemicals that comes along with that. So most often with my lovers and my girlfriends and the people that I teach, I show them how to push that edge without going over it. So pushing the soft boundary or the soft squishy part that feels really good to push against, that if you ask anyone, you want there's the the edge is suffering. The edge is
Yeah.
the edge of it. The hard edge is,
Yeah.
if you push past that edge, I will have to heal.
Yes.
But if you push
Yes.
all the way up to the edge, it will
Yes.
be pleasurable or even painful, but in a
Yeah.
way that is still expansive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's the ravishing versus raping, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
There's enough wherewithal, there's enough attention on what's happening through our different ways of perceiving reality, which in this case I look at somatic, emotional, and primal again.
Right.
If that attention is good enough, then there will not be plus or minus accidents. There will not be any crossing of the hard boundary.
Right.
It will just be
Right.
pushing the soft boundary all the way
Right.
to the edge of it.
Right.
And
so
that's what I teach.
There's so many things There's so many things I want to say. First of all, I'm an ex-data scientist, so I very much understand where you're coming from that like way of thinking. Yeah, my first one is one of my teachers taught me that really the difference between ravishment and rape is that your heart is in there. Do you agree? Do you agree with
connection?
That part?
Yeah. So three things. One, the animal's uncontrolled.
Yeah.
Not out of control. Out of control is the animal's doing whatever it wants without connection to the body, without connection to the heart.
Yeah.
So animals in control, the heart is connected because we're human. So the heart matters, the emotions matter. If that is no longer connected, then we lose ourselves in the animal, which is dangerous because the animal doesn't care about being safe. No. The animal never cares about being safe. The animal cares about how it interacts moment to moment to moment with the environment. Yeah. The heart has the capacity to see in the past and in the future. Also the mind too. Yeah. And the mind and the heart are more connected than I think we let ourselves believe, because there's a strong movement towards feeling and being away from being too intellectual. Right. And I think that's a loss, because part of what makes the mind so great is that the mind can perceive patterns. And if the pattern is hurting someone, then you can actually be really, really good about not hurting them, whether it's physically or even emotionally. And so the heart connection is important. Once it's there, then the mind can pay attention to all the ways that you could be hurting the other person and do its absolute best and be busy doing that. So instead of person being their head, they're just paying attention to all with all the boundaries, including physical boundaries, including emotional boundaries, and including primal boundaries.
Yeah, I say this as well in like the healing work that I do, is that you always need to take care of all the three parts of the brain. So the primal part, the emotional part, but then also the narrative. So sometimes in conscious communities or in tantric communities, we kind of devalue the story or the narration or the analyzation. And I think it's part of it. We need it.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't discount it completely, and you can't only rely on it either. So we need to go through all three parts. What I'm curious about in what you've seen is, my impression is that primal force is much stronger in masculine beings, in men.
Oh, in a sense, you could say that's, wow, powerful is a tricky word.
Right.
I would say if you look at, my interpretation of the masculine is it's outward. It's the power going out.
Yes.
And for the feminine, it's power going in. It's the power to bring in and transform that way. That for the masculine, it's the power going out and transform that way.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, the masculine or masculine qualities, which doesn't mean men, although you could say that men have more masculine qualities, whether it's through biology or through socialization, which goes hand in hand, of course.
Agreed.
Which it doesn't mean that we need to be essential about it. Like women can be as masculine as a bunch of men, or even multiple men altogether. It depends on the woman. But then there's a loss. It's very difficult to be really, really good at both. So, having said that, if your power is outward and the feminine's quality is to go inward, that was a perfect match. Yes. But it also means that the transformation is happening out there for men.
Yes.
Or more of the transformation that's happening out there, which can go out of balance. I think a lot of men can definitely develop their feminine more so that there can be a two-way street. It doesn't have to be just one direction. It can be both directions.
Right. But like them losing themselves in that primal energy.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That can absolutely happen. And it is a biological imperative. You are moving your seed from inside of yourself to the other person.
Yeah.
And that primal imperative can be felt.
Yeah.
But when there's no primal intelligence, when there's
Yes.
no intelligence around what's happening and how it's happening and how it can go out of control, it's the same as somebody who has who's moving around with a big tool in their hand, and they
Yeah.
turn around and they knock things out and they knock people around like with a big plank. Well, imagine that's how men move around the world with their masculine energy often.
Yeah.
So the lack of awareness, the lack of maturity, and the
Mm-hmm.
lack of a sense of their own security around their own power
Yes.
is shadow. And as
Yes.
shadow, it can actually absolutely hurt other people. And
Right.
so it is imperative for men to develop the ability to wield that power in a good way. And the same is
Right.
true for women in the ways that they receive
Yes.
and they take in and they transform that way. Because they can absolutely hurt people in the same, not in the same way, but in the same fashion of taking something and transforming it, or impacting something and transforming it for men.
Yeah, I always say that the men have to start embracing their danger in their physical body, but have an outlet for it so that they can control it and that they can dose it. And women have to do that almost in their emotional power, I think, because as a woman, you can completely break somebody apart with one look, right? Or one word. So that we also start embracing our power there, and to learn how to dose that. I want to come back to something you said in the beginning, that you were you spent a lot of years hating yourself and being really afraid that you would be one of the scary men.
Yeah.
What's your advice for, because I have a lot of men around me that have this fear of just really trying to be good men and not wanting to be one of the bad guys that hurts women or whatever. And in that way, they lose a really essential part of their masculinity, it seems, and they become less attractive even, because they are too, it's not just the too nice, it's also the polarization is gone.
That's it. So if you try to become less masculine, then the polarization goes away.
Yes.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing. If you meet somebody else
who
wants the same level or the same non-polarization,
right?
Which in David Data, if you like David Data, which you may or may not, I mean, not everybody likes him.
Yeah.
That's stage one, is essentially a polarization that's based in ego. So it lacks mature. It's basically it's basically a polarization in the shadow. Lacks maturity, lacks security. By security, I mean like security in yourself and how you wield it.
Yeah.
Which takes practice. Like, if everybody is a dangerous animal, everybody can be dangerous. Everybody can kill somebody on the street. We can. Yeah. And what stops us is either shadows, which is lack of maturity, lack of awareness, and lack of security, or it is our ability to know and discern when it's time to use that power and how. So that's a sense of inner security, awareness, and maturity. Okay, so the way for men to develop this is not to have less polarity, although that's generally safer, but while they develop less polarity, because they're trying to make themselves more equal to women, which is great. Yeah. On one hand, the lack of polarity is often related to a fear or a lack of maturity.
Yes.
There's a fear that if they go there, they're going to, and so those shadows, if you want to look at it from a more spiritual standpoint, remain there. There's not enough practice. There's not enough of a sense of how dangerous can I be? How much danger, how much harm can I inflict? Now, having said that, that doesn't mean you have to go out there and harm someone.
Yeah.
But you need the practice of using your body and using your heart and using your words and using your whole self.
Yes.
To develop the consciousness that allows you to not be dangerous with it.
Right.
You can't, like, for example, if I hand you a chainsaw, you don't know how dangerous it is until you've had a lot of practice using it. Yes. Which means you could start chopping things up around. And so it requires teachers, it requires personal development, self-responsibility. You have to try it in small steps to know, okay, I'm gonna cut this 2x4, and now I'm gonna cut this little tree, and you have to decide which tree needs to be cut, not every tree in the neighborhood. And so that's a simplified analogy. Yeah. Part of the power of developing your power is to learn. Imagine it's magic. Like Harry Potter, right? They practice for years their magic, right? And it's not obvious exact, they go to a school. nowadays the school that we have to develop our power is just the field. It's
Yeah.
the culture. Now, women from a very young age discover that they have the power. They have a power that they wield.
Yes.
And depending on their looks, so depending on how they move, depending
Yeah.
on how they look, use
Yeah.
just their gaze, the power they have, they turn. That's power. If you can move
Yes.
someone,
Yeah.
it's power.
Yes.
And if you can move someone either that way, by the way you receive their attention, or by the ways you push your attention on them, that's power. Now, how do you learn to use the power well? You have to learn. You have to practice. You have to make mistakes.
Yes.
Like I always say, like the only way to become a good lover is to be a lover for a long time and make mistakes. And some people will have to learn from your bad mistakes.
Yes.
Some people will.
Yeah.
You will have to learn on the back of other people who had to be at the receiving end of your mistake. There's no other way. Yeah. But in society, there's so little. I mean, I think there's more and more that there's so little chance that we get to practice and make mistakes and be okay. All right, this was a mistake. I'm really sorry about that. I did not intend it that way. Or now I'm realizing there's a piece of shadow around me that's really angry at somebody like you, and I need to do some work around that. But our sexuality is really taboo in a lot of ways, and prevents us from just saying, hey, can I practice with you? Now, you can do that with basketball, but you can't do that with sex.
Yeah. So what if, okay, I know a lot of women, for instance, really want to be pushed against the wall, right? Or the feminine beings. They want to be pushed against the wall. And a lot of men are too afraid to do that. They don't want to hurt her. They don't want to do something that maybe she isn't consenting to. What would you advise the men that are like, I'm not sure, does she want this? I don't know. Maybe I do something that she doesn't want. Yeah. How do they maybe gain the sensitivity to feel in a certain situation what is okay and what isn't?
Well, back to practice. Okay. So if you've never pushed somebody against the wall, I mean, I pushed some people against the wall, and some of them years later told me that was like totally crossed the boundary, and in the moment it looked great. Right. And so all I could do is say, I am so sorry. It looked right and it wasn't, and now I'm learning a massive amount from that. Right. And it was every moment like this where I've tried something and I went too far, too early, too quickly. Yeah. I've had to learn that hard lesson. And every time the lesson for me was always take little steps. Don't take the big step. Never do fast what you can't do slow first. What you can't do well slowly first. Right. You have to be able to do it well slowly with a particular person, and with a new person it'll be different. So a lot of it looks like having conversations. Do you like being pushed against the wall? How would that be for you? Yeah. Because maybe her body wants it, but her heart is like, I'm not ready for that. So there's many layers in each person that has their own version of consent, and they have to be all aligned in order to engage in a particular way that is risky. The same is true with partner acrobatics. You wouldn't do partner acrobatics with someone randomly unless you know they're good at it, they're willing, they're ready, and they have the ability. Consent is, so let's go back to consent. Yeah. Ready, willing, able, informed. Right. Very, very simple. If you got all four, you're good to go. If you meet somebody on the street, how do you know they're ready? How do you know all of them is ready? How do you know they're willing? How do you know all of them is willing? How do you know they're actually able to engage at that level? Yeah. And if they don't know, are they going to take it well? Yeah. So in order to engage well with somebody, full consent is important. And most people think full consent is, can I push you against the wall? Yeah. But the truth is that it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot more nuances than that. So I would not push a random person against the wall ever again. Right. Because I learned that lesson. Yeah. So what do I say to men is start by learning to engage with consent, which looks like conversations, which looks like multiple dates. So you're starting to get a sense of what's going on with this body in front of you, with this heart in front of you, with this animal inside of you. Yes. And you can discover that through questions. You can say, have you ever been ravished? Have you ever been pushed against the wall? How would that be for you? Yeah. And just in the sort of what if situation, you create the possibility of something happening. Yeah. And you get to learn from just that possibility arising in this person's head. And that's like a fantasy.
Yeah.
You're planting a fantasy in their head,
Yeah.
and then you see how it lands. And if it doesn't land well, then obviously you saved yourself and you saved them a mistake that you could have made. Now, even in full consent, you might actually be crossing a boundary.
Yeah.
But the idea is to discover the nature of their soft boundary. Imagine like it's a squishy, it's a squishy, like, what do you call that? Like a squishy mattress around their zone of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
And you're pushing against that.
Yeah.
And that creates either pleasure or up to a point, and then at some point it's pain. If you don't know the nature of that squishy boundary and the hard boundary that's behind it that could be broken, then chances are you might just push too hard and break the hard boundary. So you need to talk, you need to connect, you need bodies to connect with bodies, hearts to connect with hearts, animals connecting with animals, and minds also connecting with minds.
Yeah. So there's so many beautiful things to unwrap here. Like trying to feel what I want to go into first. Yes, that squishy area that you talk about is where where my most fulfilling, nourishing, healing, transformational sexual experience have been. Like, I feel like I've healed. Where I've healed from deep traumas and grief and heartbreak happened in a squishy sexual area.
Totally.
And so to find lovers that are willing to go there with you has always, for me, been like my biggest gifts in a year, that I thought, thank God that I met this person, because wow, we went into the squishy area. Yeah. And people don't realize that. They think we all have to stay very safe and, comfortable, that actually maybe in the awkwardness or the discomfort or in the gray is really where the juice is.
Yeah. Well, okay. So look at it this way. If you go to the gym, you're not going to pick the 2 pound, right? The 2 pound is in your comfort zone. You're going to pick the weight that is in that gray, juicy, squishy area. That's where, and you're going to push against your hard boundary. And what happens if you work out properly, you're breaking down the muscle.
Yeah.
You're actually hurting the muscle, which it's, so you could look at it as you're breaking down that hard boundary, but very, very slightly so it can move.
Yeah.
Or you push against the soft boundary, and as you push against it, it actually pushes the hard boundary just a tiny bit. And that's how you grow your comfort zone. That's how you grow yourself, is by pushing against your boundaries so that they start moving. But you have to do it safely. So that's another piece. It's not just about talking to the other person.
Yeah.
It's about engaging with those boundaries in a way that creates more connection and trust. So, and the way that looks like is, hey, I'm going to push your, how would you like me to push your boundaries a little bit? And it could look like, would you like me to spank you? Would you like me to, touch your face? It could be anything, right?
Yeah.
The way it looks, this is the meta conversation. Hey, I would like to push your boundaries. I think it's going to feel good. I'm excited about it. Maybe you can push my boundaries too. And we're going to grow from this.
Yeah.
And it's going to be pleasurable. Yeah. And both people are like, that sounds great. Let's do that. Right? And then the next step is to actually push against the boundary a little bit, not too much, and then back off. And then say, how was that?
Right.
And the other person's like, wow, you pushed against my boundary, you backed off, now you're asking me. And that creates more deeper connection, because now for the person whose boundary was being pushed, they have the experience of somebody who's pushing a little bit and backing off. They know it's possible for the other person to back off. They now know it's possible for the other person to ask for feedback. All of that's good. Yes. All of that is great. Now you do that 10 times.
Yeah.
And at that point, 10 times, 12 times, 20 times, doesn't matter. More than once. Yeah. You're already ahead of the curve compared to most people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Because most people,
100%.
Most people don't check. Most people don't really even realize there's a soft boundary. They just do whatever. Yeah. Okay. So already you're ahead of the curve because you're checking, you're asking for feedback, and you're backing off. You're even pausing, right? Yeah. If you're doing that right away, what's happening is that you're creating a conversation around feedback, a conversation around how was that for you, a conversation of checking in, a conversation of deeper connection, which then leads to deeper trust. And that deeper trust, as it builds, allows, and there's different ways that trust arises. Okay, so the conversation around deeper trust eventually or slowly develops what I call sovereignty and consent. And the consent is, do I want to find out how this person engages with me next moment to moment to moment? Yes, My desire is I want to find out about the next moment. And over
Yeah.
time, this develops what I call sovereignty, which is
Yes.
the knowing that no matter what happens, I get to choose how
Yeah.
this person engages with me, because I
Yeah.
already know they're willing to check in with me.
Yeah. So what about the dynamic? I know I've been in it many times before I
Yeah.
really went into Tantra, is finding it really scary to communicate that maybe something wasn't great because I was really afraid of hurting his feelings. And often I would hurt his feelings if I would
Yeah.
express it. So what to
Right.
do with the
Yeah.
dynamic that it is sometimes, especially for the giver,
Mhm.
really hard to hear that something didn't go well. How do you not
Ah.
personalize that? Like, how do you deal with that pain?
Okay. So the pain that arises, that's a lack, to me, that's a lack of security.
Right.
Like you don't know your own skills.
Yeah.
And so you're worried about either hurting the other person, or you're worried about not doing it right. That's all, to me, that's all insecurity. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Or it could be immaturity. You don't know how to engage because you haven't had the practice.
Yes.
Or it's a lack of awareness. And then you're worried that because your lack of awareness, you could just be like a bull in a china shop,
Yeah.
if you know the expression.
Yes.
Um, and so yeah, that could be the reaction could be difficult. So as a receiver, it's important to also feel into your giver. You're
Mm-hmm.
not, when you're receiving, you're not just receiving, you're also, it's important for, if you're going to have like a super simple Betty Martin giver receiver
Yeah.
interaction,
Yeah.
Betty Martin style wheel of consent, for those
Yes.
people who don't know what I'm talking about. It's important for the giver to really feel into their receiver and calibrate.
Yes.
But it's
That's
also
beautiful.
important for the receiver to learn how to receive well. And receiving well means
Oof.
being able to give feedback in a way that the giver can take.
Oof. Okay, so
so
what's the right way
so
for
that
me to say, like, I need you to touch me a bit differently?
oh, okay. So immediately, right away, if the giver doesn't set up the conversation around how
Yeah.
was that for you, then
Yeah.
you have to bring it in, because
Right.
it's both people's responsibility. It's not just the receiver. The
Oof.
receiver is the receiver, but they're only initially in an interaction.
Yeah.
So let me backtrack for a second.
Yeah.
For an interaction to go well, you need a lot of mutuality. For
Yes.
mutuality to happen, you need a lot of practice.
Yeah.
If you're meeting somebody for the first time, there's no mutuality, there's no sense of this is the best way for us to engage.
Yeah.
Both people have to take responsibility for that. It's harder for women because typically they want to there's more of a sense of wanting to surrender. So to
Yes.
advocate for your needs, and this is more difficult because of culture. It's also more difficult because men are more disagreeable. They just want to do what they want to do, more likely, and women are more likely to say yes even though they don't like it.
Right.
So
Yes.
it doesn't
Yes.
set up a good interaction right away. So
Yes.
you have
Yeah.
to compensate for that. So if you're a woman who knows how to advocate for your needs, which means you're less agreeable, you're more balanced on the agreeable disagreeable
Yes.
spectrum,
Yeah.
then you'll be ready, willing, and able. You'll be able to consent to actually saying, this is how I like to be touched. All right.
Right.
So to answer your question, the way you would set up right away is, I'd like us to touch each other, and I'd like
Yeah.
us to give each other feedback around how we like to be touched, because we all
Yeah.
have different ways of liking to be touched in different
Yes.
parts of our body.
Yeah.
Right. And then you set up the conversation so that it's going to be about exploration, practice, and
Right.
communication.
Like, kind of introducing the
If
element of play. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you set up play is to me, it's a little bit more unstructured. This is more of
Right.
the elements of let's learn from each other.
Right.
And in the learning process, there is no wrong.
Yeah.
There's just, we're learning. There's
Yeah.
just, even if you make a mistake, there's nothing wrong with that. So
Yeah.
you set up a basic agreements with that you want to have with people that you don't have any other agreements with so far.
Yeah.
And the agreements is what creates mutuality. So right
Yeah.
away you say, if we're going to touch, I want this to be in a way that we're both learning from each other. There's nothing wrong we can do, as long as
Yes.
it's at least not egregious.
Yeah.
and we both agree that we care for the way the other person's receiving. And the
Yeah.
better this goes, the more we're going to want to do this again. And you
Yes.
tell that to a man, like, if you do a good job, which I'm totally willing to tell you and correct and make the correction so you
Yeah.
can do a good job and you can win, we're more likely to do this again. You're not taking
Yeah.
promises. You're just saying that if this goes well, I'll probably want to say yes again next time. If it
Yes.
doesn't go well, then probably not. And the same
Right.
goes for you. If I
Right.
touch your cock, or if I touch you in a way that you
Yeah.
don't like, I pinch
Yeah.
you in the wrong places, what would you say?
Yeah.
Hell no.
Yeah. That
So,
was so nice. Yeah.
so you set the tone for, we can do no wrong, no,
Yeah.
as long as it's accidental,
Yeah.
and we're both willing to learn from each other. And
Yeah.
if you do this even in the first 10 minutes, then
Right.
you create the possibility of that connection and trust to lead to a consent that's really authentic. You're not just taking a
Right.
chance, you're
Right.
actually engaging well. Okay, so it looks
Right.
like all the things that I said so far, but it can also look like, if you haven't had a chance to say that, you can just like pause the person and say, hey, I would really love, can I show you how I really like to be touched? Because I want you to not only enjoy what you're doing, but I want to enjoy it even more.
Yes. I
And
want to enjoy it
you
even
support
more.
them.
That's a
Yeah.
beautiful sentence. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
I'm realizing that maybe you have no idea how to best touch me,
Right.
because not everybody knows, and it's
No.
okay.
Yeah.
Can I show you? Like,
Yeah.
and once I show you, you'll know exactly what to do. So I'm even more in my pleasure, and
Yeah.
even more in my surrender, because now I know that you know, and that creates a really good conversation and really good trust between us. I mean, that's a lot of words.
Yeah.
But initially, I would imagine that you would want to have these conversations way
Yeah.
ahead of time, whether it's at a restaurant or a coffee shop, and where it goes like, how do you like to engage with somebody else's pleasure?
Yeah.
And the possible pain that can arise. How do you
Right.
want to engage with their trust? How do you want to create connection? And
Yeah.
even in these how questions, a
Yeah.
lot will come out.
Yeah.
And even those in the answering of these questions, a lot of trust will come out, because now you'll know, now they'll know, and there will be no excuse
Yeah.
for not knowing later. And if they still don't pay attention, you can just be like, no thanks, I don't want to
Right.
do this anymore.
Right. I was just going to ask you, like, if I make it in a very heteronormative gendered sense, like,
Yeah.
I know there are a lot of women that don't trust what men say to them because it feels like it's just like a packaging to
Yeah.
get sex or whatever. Like maybe he's
Yeah.
romantic, or he says, I want to take you to
the goal.
Paris. And it's, you could feel somewhere underneath that maybe he isn't genuine.
Yeah.
Maybe he actually does mean it in that moment, but the moment sex happened, his preferences change. So
his animal takes over.
His animal takes over. Yeah. So
Totally possible.
So I love what you're saying, and I know, especially for people in the more conscious tantric community, this is a very reasonable conversation to have. For a lot of people who are outside of that, this is already a very big step. So how, on the side of the men, what can we advise them or give them as wisdom to be honest about what you are trying to create with a woman?
That's tricky.
Let me put it differently. Why are they not? Why are they not?
Okay, I suspect. Okay,
Yeah.
so one, which is I think a lot of people are going to say right away, it's patriarchy. Patriarchy teaches men to only care about their own thing and not care about others. I don't fully believe that.
No,
I think it's a front.
Yeah.
And I think at the surface level, it is true. It does teach some version of to each his own, and try to get the most, get the most you can and get the hell out.
Right.
So, but I think at a deeper level,
yeah.
Most men really want a good interaction, really want an interaction that can happen again because the other person had a great time. Right? Like, would you want that? Like, if it was great, yeah. So what's it gonna take? Sorry, you have to repeat your question. I lost track of it. Sorry.
Don't worry. What wisdom can we give men that are feeling the need to maybe not be completely honest, for instance, about wanting a one-night stand?
Right.
Wanting to package that.
Yeah. To me, that brings it back to the practice thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, I think men could use to develop their emotional intelligence and their primal intelligence a lot more.
Right.
And by doing that, they're gonna be able to feel what's going on, that they just want to have that connection.
Yeah.
That looks like a one-night stand. I think it looks like the animal is just ravenous, and they don't know how to engage with that. Fortunately for me, when I went into in my 20s, it was like that, and it was wild. I was like, whoa, I don't know how to engage with somebody because there's a part of me that just wants to ravish, and I have not tamed that part of me.
Yeah.
In my 30s and 40s, hormone levels started to shift a little bit, and I was able to act, and also I became more mature and more aware. So I was able to engage better with my inner animal.
Yes.
I think on top of that, and I think that's a patriarchy piece, I think men are encouraged to look like a particular kind of man,
Yes.
and encouraged to behave as such.
Yes.
And that looks like somebody who's really in charge, is really in touch with their animal, but it's not true. To me, it's a
Yes.
front. They look like they're in their animal, but they're not really in touch with their animal. It's just a front. It's
Yes.
just a surface level costume that they put on. They don't really know what their animal wants. They don't really know that the animal is inherently objectifying, and that's okay. If you find a lover who's also a yes to that, because there's something in it for them as well. So what I would tell men is develop your emotional intelligence so you can create a solid connection with the woman that you're with.
Yeah.
And from that solid connection, you can create the trust. And I'm actually teaching one of my clients about this right now. They have a solid emotional connection. But there's mistrust because of what's been happening early on, and what happened early on in their marriage.
Yes.
And as a result, there is not really a full willingness to be uncontrolled.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it takes the connection. It takes the connection. It takes the trust before you get to authentic consent. Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with a one-night stand, but you need to have enough connection and trust, which could be in a minute or it could be in an hour. And all the fake things that men do to pretend to create connection and trust actually leads to is not authentic. Yeah. Okay, you have to know for yourself what is the authentic connection you want to create, and some women will be up for it, and some women will not be. Yeah. And it's also tricky because if men have not developed their animal and they don't know how to engage with it, the animal will move them from the shadows.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it will cause them to actually want things in a way that is not fully authentic. It's not fully aligned with everybody in the room, including themselves, including all parts of themselves. And so that further disconnects them from between their animal and their heart, and their animal and their body, because they're just following what the animal is saying. And like I said before, we're animal first, human second, and men and women third. Yeah. And unfortunately, that continues to contribute to the disconnection. Yeah. At the same time, it's hard to find somebody to have sex with, because your body and your animal is saying sex is like the thing that you can't not focus on. Yeah. and I do know women who feel the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
So on the flip side, the difficulty with women is that they haven't been they're very good at emotional intelligence, but they haven't developed their primal and somatic intelligence either.
Ooh, can you say more about that?
Well, it's if you look at the rewilding and women getting more in touch with with their blood and with their primal nature, that to me that shows that we're moving in the direction of women getting more in touch with their primal animal, which is also objectified. Yes, but it also connects with with having children. And right now the narrative is women may or may not want to have children, which is in opposition to what their animal wants. Right. Their animal wants babies. Yes. Plus or minus some exceptions. Right. But the cultural narrative is you need to have the choice. Right. And a lot of women find themselves at odds between the two. Yes. And so I think this along with that cultural narrative makes it harder for women to be fully in touch with their animal and fully engage with men from the position of their animal. Yes. It's also tricky that women hit puberty before men. Yes. Yeah. So this sets up the difference in age, where puberty is happening, where men are going to be men or boys in this case are going to be interested in women that are younger. And when you look at teenage years, that for us culturally speaking, that's significantly lower. Yeah. Like between, if the woman hits puberty at 12 or 13 or I don't know the exact ages, and for men it's 15 or 16, already you're like, wait, no, culturally this is not okay. Yeah. But but there's already biologically. Biologically. And women are not taught to engage with that power in a way that is also responsible. Like we're told, no, you can't have sex until you're 16, 17, or whenever we say you're supposed to have sex. Same for men. Yeah. So during those ages, those very important years, there is no teaching around how to engage with that primal energy.
And it's all shadow.
So it's it all ends up being shadow.
Yeah.
And so women have this power. They either shut it down or they use it.
Yeah.
But there's a risk associated with using primal energy, and the same thing is true for men. But the cultural narrative is that women get to choose and men have to choose.
Right.
And it's very, very tricky when we don't have these honest conversations around how this primal energy moves us.
Yes.
It puts a lot of people into categories that they're into categories of what's okay, what's not okay, even though the animal says otherwise.
Yeah.
And we don't make it, because we don't resolve this, and we don't have this space in our society to actually resolve this for teenagers to have the interactions that would allow them to learn to practice.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a different example.
Yeah.
So rough housing. I have a son. He's just turning 9 next week, right? And we've been rough housing since he was 3.
Right.
At first, I would just throw pillows at him, trying to make him fall. And now it's evolving, right? It's evolving. And there was a point a few months ago where he said, Dada, can I don't want you to play weaker than you are. And I'm like, I don't know how to do this. I'm gonna kick your butt. I don't want to kick your butt if I play full out. So we started developing rules of engagement that allows me to play harder, but him to win more easily.
Oh.
And so we find ways to balance, but this balancing is risky. It's inherently risky.
Yes.
So we learn to balance, and we learn that sometimes we hurt each other. Sometimes you'll kick me in the face, or I mean, it's like, we've gotten bruises out of it.
Yeah.
But the more we do it, the more we learn to do it well. So now translate that to sex.
Yes.
Between men and women, or between animals.
Yeah.
Right. Animals learn how to do this from a very young age. There's nothing that tells the animal you can or can't pump someone, or you have to wait. And when the animals are not ready, they growl at each other, or they have a rage. They have rage against each other that pushes the other person or the other animal away.
Yeah.
Culturally, we've put boxes around how the interactions are going, which prevents us from that practice, prevents us from learning to be in our power in a way that is fully cognizant of how this power works. So we have that magic inside of us, and we don't know how to use it. And unfortunately, this prevents everyone from having better interactions at a sexual level.
Yes. Whew. Okay. There's several things I want to say.
Yes, please.
I was moved by the sentence that a lot of men look like they've got their primal intelligence figured out. And they do not. Yeah. I will say that I've been in several abusive relationships. All of them for me came down to exactly this. They were men that looked very primal and very manly. But then when I actually addressed the primal part, it became very weird, shadowy, shame, whatever. And it ended up being right. How as a woman do you know maybe to recognize a healthy primal intelligence?
Again, I hate to say this, but it's going back to practice.
Yeah, because I now know how it feels. I know how a man feels now.
I'll tell you how. She develops her own primal.
Oof. Okay.
Her own animal will know if the other animal is safe to play with. And even with just a tiny bit of practice, she will know. Okay, so imagine if you're a really good musician or a really good dancer, won't you recognize good dancers or good musicians when you play or dance with them?
Beautiful.
Right? So the more a woman develops her own primal, the more she will know primally if and it's not going to be an if, it's going to be we're going to start playing together and we're going to start showing each other how we play.
Yeah.
And that brings us to what's called the infinite game. The infinite game at a somatic level, which animals play all the time, is the game where you learn to play with each other in a way that will keep other people inviting you, that will keep everyone inviting everyone to play the game.
Right.
Don't play well, or you cheat in the ways that you play. Other people will say, "I don't want to play with you anymore," and then because you feel ousted, it will support you in actually playing better because you want to play with others.
Right.
to the degree that you're not a sociopath, but
Right.
that's a different story. So because a sociopath will say, oh, this is how we play. Okay, well, I can still get my way, but
Yeah.
anyway, that's a different story.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to talk about sociopaths.
Yeah.
So in order to do this at a sexual, primal, somatic, emotional level, you have to learn how to you have to learn how to be good, how to perceive and engage well. So you
Right.
have to be good at it. So somebody who doesn't have a lot of emotional intelligence will not know how to engage emotionally in a way that's emotionally intelligent.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm gonna connect that to emotional intelligence for women. Women have a lot
Yes.
of practice, but many women are insecure, immature, or
Yeah.
unaware about
Yes.
about emotional intelligence. They have some parts right, and there
Yes.
are some
Yeah.
parts
Yeah.
that they haven't learned how to engage because they're insecure.
Yeah.
So they might pick someone who actually arouses them from a place of
Mm.
fear,
Oof.
and they will think that's passion, or they will think
Yes.
that's falling in love, when what's happening is they're actually connecting with someone who's leaning away from them. And
Yes.
whenever they say, I'm going to give you some attention, it makes them feel special, which plays into their insecurity. So being emotionally intelligent means that you recognize this happening,
Yeah.
and you say, okay, this person's not good for me.
Yeah.
As much attraction as I feel, as
Yes.
much as I feel like I want to be with them, and I don't know if that's the case for you, that may or may not be.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I feel that attraction, it's actually a false attraction. It
Yes.
is a recognition of each other's insecurities, and it's a you get right away that it's a front because it's shallow.
Yes. So for me, I learned a lot about attachment theory after the last abusive
That's right.
relationship. And it was so clear that I was on the anxious side and I was attracted to avoidant men. And when it became so insanely clear, almost the absurdity of the situation was there. So now every time I saw a man that was avoidant, I was like, oh yeah, the old me would have been so into that. And it makes no sense.
Right.
Because he's
You've
not going to
grown
make me
yourself.
happy. He's going to make me, going to torture me, and we're going to torture each other because that's the
It's gonna be
dynamic.
so good, but so
Ugh.
ugly and so bloody and so pleasurable, which is very primal too, by the way.
Right. Right.
So animals would just play into that, and whenever
Yes.
they're done, and they walk away from each other.
Yeah.
But because we're smarter than that,
Yeah.
we do recognize the beauty and be able to team up and
Yes.
create something more than just when we're alone. And that beauty requires some alignment or some similar trajectory in learning how to become better humans. Otherwise, it falls apart, which is fine. Everybody breaks up every once in a while.
Yeah.
But if you're going to have kids, or if you're going to have a long-term relationship, it's going to be more damaging than otherwise.
Yeah. My late mother always told me, she's like, at a certain point with age, you're going to realize the person you are very attracted to is not necessarily the person that will make you happy.
Right. Who's good for you and who you want are two very different things. The more secure you become, the more you recognize that a long-term relationship requires sustainability, which can't live on you feeling high all the time, because you have to come back down.
Yes.
So in a relationship that's high, low, high, low, high, low, like where you get addicted to the other person, but that addiction is not sustainable.
Yeah.
Eventually it's going to fall apart. It's going to become too volatile, or the interaction is going to lock in the worst possible way, create more chaos, and eventually the relationship will fall apart. So back to your question around how do you recognize a man that's good for you, or a person that's good for you, regardless, is you have to recognize both people's capacity to engage. And the only way you can do this is by practicing, getting a sense of their history, getting a sense of their trajectory. Somebody who's aware has a trajectory. They know, especially an avoidant person, if that's your style, an avoidant person who knows their trajectory will be able to recognize their patterns.
Yes.
And you'll be able to say, hey, do you know when you're in your avoidant patterns? And they'll be able to say, and I would be able to tell you, like, I need some time, or I need some space, and it's not your fault, or maybe it is your fault, but I'm doing that work on myself, so you don't have to, but you'll have to be patient, because an avoidant person tends to be much slower in their emotional engagement. And that's the downside of an avoidant. The upside is they can look at things without emotions and actually be very reasonable, very, very rational and reasonable. And for an anxious person, that's near impossible. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. How can you be rational about this? And so there's deep learning and medicine for each person if they can muster it.
What's the medicine of the anxious?
The medicine of the anxious is how to feel.
Right.
Is that feeling is okay. Feeling is part of life. Feeling and interdependence and depending on each other is a part of relating. And the medicine of the avoidant is, yes, you can do it, or you can do it by yourself. It's not necessarily the best way, but it's doable. Good for the anxious to know. You don't need your partner all the time. You can take care of yourself. You can find other people to help you. That's not just your partner.
Yeah.
Because there's a tendency to just focus on that one person to fulfill all your needs.
Yeah.
Because you start to trust them, and when you feel you can trust them, you don't want them to go away. But the more you don't want them to go away, the more they're like, I don't have a choice anymore, and they do want to go away.
Yeah. So the endless torture.
Yeah, that's the anxious avoidant death. And then the lesson of the anxious towards the avoidant is it is possible to feel. It is possible to experience life in this really beautiful, passionate, vivid, enlivening way. Without necessarily getting lost in it.
Right. Okay, then one last question for you. I know we've already discussed this a little bit on my Facebook comments. The main thing I hear from women is that they think no man can handle them.
Well, I think that's an anxious statement.
Tell me.
I think okay. So I say, okay, what would a secure person say? A secure person would say, I have emotions, I have needs.
Yeah.
Take them or leave them, because I want to be with somebody who can meet me.
Right. Simple.
So somebody was like, I think I'm too much. And I say this not only I say this because I've heard this a lot from women who are anxious.
Yes.
And I think the reason for this, and this is a lot of some of it is guesses, some of it is just from lots and hours in a conversation with my wife, who's anxious used to be more than now. But she's still struggling towards that. And a lot of women who I know to be anxious in conversations and said the same thing.
Yeah.
I've never heard that from an avoidant woman.
No.
So part of the reason for this is because I think anxious women and men, not just women, are in this massive jungle of emotions.
Right.
It's like never ending. It's always arising. It's overwhelming. So of course they would believe that it's too much for others. And in their interactions with avoidant people over time, over their whole life, they've seen avoidant people like, that's too much, I'm going over there. Thank you very much. That was I got my fill in 3.5 seconds. So they do learn from experience that some people think they're too much.
Right. Yeah. Because they are for some people.
Yeah, they are for some people. So it's a relative experience that will not occur with secure people. Secure people around them in their life will say, hey, I need a little break right now. Everything's great. Okay. I need a little break. I'm overloading right now. I'm going to go over there. But I'll be back and we're good. An avoidant person will basically overload, then leave, because they don't really know what just happened, but they just know that less of that person is better.
Right.
because they need to auto-regulate. And auto-regulation in attachment theory means you need to be by yourself in order to find your own balance. And you can't flip a switch. You can't just say that's not true anymore. You have to. In the same way that an anxious woman cannot flip a switch and stop all the emotions from happening. She can't. And she needs somebody to balance her. She can't just say, I don't need it anymore. In the same way that the avoidant person can't say, I don't need to be by myself anymore. They can't.
No.
So
Primal.
That's the starting point. So the starting point and the reality of it is that an anxious woman, or anybody who's anxious, or whether or not you want to call it anxious, call it whatever you want. Some people are too much for some other people. Generally anxious.
That's relaxing to hear. Right? I find that really, like, if you actually accept that maybe you are too much for some people. Okay. But not for everybody.
But it's tricky because you do want people around you. So when you experience the reality of I'm too much for some people and some people will leave me, will abandon me, that's very hurtful. like to know that some people that you think you can trust, that can take your way, they can take your needing to balance on them, will eventually leave you. That's very challenging to experience.
Yeah, I understand.
And the flip side of that is it's challenging for avoidant people, men or women.
Yeah.
It seems more men than women. Apparently it's 50-50.
Really?
It's very yeah, apparently. But culturally speaking, it looks more like men. But if you talk to an anxious man, which they exist, and you talk to an avoidant woman, which Amanda is avoidant.
Yeah.
And so
I can see that.
Totally. And
I
that's why you guys are friends.
Yeah.
You guys are probably good friend because you have medicine for each other. That's not too much because you're not so close.
Yeah.
So it's actually really beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can help each other around perceiving what's going on with with other people in their life and your life.
Yeah.
So the tricky bit for an avoidant person is, at some point, the person that I'm with will go crazy.
Right.
Crazy. It's not that they are.
Yeah.
It's just that this person will be so freaked out by the possibility of being abandoned that they will ask for more and more and more and more.
Right.
And so eventually the experience of the avoidant is eventually everyone will blow up on me.
Yeah.
And so I have to keep my distance. Eventually the person that I'm with will be overwhelming to me with their emotions, either blow up or not. Yeah. And I will have to take my space, and they will blow up even more when I take my space. Yes. There's a lack of trust there, and the lack of trust there.
Yes.
And that lack of trust is what's harmful, is what leads to harmful behavior.
Yeah. So how do you bring the trust back?
Slow down.
Yeah, I love
baby
that.
steps, slow down, create the connection, create trust very, very slowly. It's particularly difficult between anxious and avoidant. Yeah. It's a lot easier when one person's secure in the relationship. Yeah. Most people have some level of insecurity. Yes. Most people and most couples has one person who's much more secure than the other person, which means that the more secure person will do more of the work, more of the emotional labor than the other person. Totally normal, totally natural. You can't avoid that. Yeah. It's better if you're going to get together with someone. It's better that you get together for a long-term relationship past the romantic phase. Right. In order to go past the romantic phase, you need to be with someone who's secure enough, or at least at a secure enough level and close enough to you on your trajectory of learning to become more secure, mature, and aware. So that you can have these conversations where things get out of whack, where one person's going faster than the other and supporting the other and staying with us and keeping the connection and the trust alive. Yeah. That's the goal. If you're going to just have fun for a month or 6 or 12 or 18 or however long the romantic phase is going, then knock yourself out. But the anxious person will not always, but more often than not, have a harder time, because not only will they have to grieve the relationship and grieve the possibility and the shame of maybe I was too much, right? Going back to that self-fulfilling prophecy, but they will also have to grieve the relationship, and they will also have to detach. And the detaching process is like addiction. Yeah. It's like physical addiction. And I've seen some research around that too. Yeah. I was suspecting that for a long time. But you really are, attachment is a form of addiction. Yeah. That's generally adaptive. It's good to be addicted to your be addicted to your partner, because it means you're a team and you don't just walk away randomly. Yeah. And that came from nature. Like animals are not like, this is my partner, I love my partner. They don't have that. They don't have that deeper sense of relating. They just know, I want to stay with this person. I want to stay with this other animal because now we're attached. That attachment is caused by a form of addiction. You walk away long enough and you're like, whoa, I miss my other animal. I'm going to come back to them and we're going to fuck some more and make more babies.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. My very, very, very last question. Okay. You started your story with saying that you had a lot of hating yourself for maybe being a certain man. So I would love to just end it with, maybe, what do you think is the gift of the masculine? What's the beauty of the masculine? What does the masculine have to give in this world?
Well, you end with the word give, right? Because the masculine is the masculine. Well, okay, so there's a few different layers to your question. One of them is,
tell me,
is what do men have to give to the world, and then what does the masculine have to give to the world. Masculine is an energy that pushes outward, at least from where I'm sitting. And the feminine is one that receives. Okay, so that interaction. So you cannot have an energy that receives without an energy that gives. So just by being, you've already done your job. So right away, you're part of a system that is hopefully a good system that is healthy. But we already know that we may not know in this conversation, but because we have this extra layer of brain, we can make things a lot more complicated than they need to be. We can also be much more adaptive because we have the neocortex. We actually, that neocortex was created by the cortex, which is the mammalian brain, if I understand correctly, to be even more adaptive, to be even better at survival, which at this point in the game of survival, we might actually sort of evolve ourselves into extinction. But I mean, evolution doesn't really know what's best, right? It just keeps on building up on top of the previous thing. So at this point in the game, men and women are locked in this system that is changing rapidly. And it's very difficult to know where to stand in order to have a good role in the engagement that you have with people that are supposed to be in this role with you. So whether you want to be equals, whether you want to be in a polarity, it's anybody's guess what's better. We've evolved ourselves to have that choice. Is it better? It's not obviously clear. We don't know what's going to be dropped off later on, or how what we have right now is going to evolve. So, so your question, I would say your question again. I'm trying to keep the thread.
My question is, what's the gift from men or from the masculine? What's the beauty?
Okay. Well, at this point in the game, I would say that men hold more masculine qualities. Masculine qualities are very projected outwards. It's necessary in the engagement with women and the feminine. Sometimes things are flipped. Sometimes men have more feminine and women have more masculine. Creating an engagement where there's a well-balanced polarity is like creating a dance where there's good balance between both people. Either both people show up at full balance and they engage from that place, or you engage, but not everybody is secure. So some people are out of balance and they find somebody else to be out of balance with and learn from that. And so I think in general, it's a very general statement, is that men bring more of these masculine qualities based on biology. So in that way, I think men, generally speaking, again, very general, are better at masculine qualities than feminine qualities. Again, not always the truth. And we absolutely see all over the place that it's not true. So I think it's important for men and women to actually find a role that fits them well. And really practice that role and embody it fully and then grow from them. So becoming more mature, secure, and aware as a man, whatever that looks like for you. So, and in that context, I want to speak to a men's retreat that I organized. That's exactly for that. And it works perfectly with your question. It's called the Remember Brotherhood Journey.
Oh, I love that.
So it's about remembering who we are as men, not just from our history and from our culture, but from what's arising inside of us. So there's a feeling into the lineage of men that we're a part of, but also including our own particular flavor, or the way I like to call it, our own part, bringing to the table our own particular facet of the jewel of manhood. And every man gets to be a different facet, and we create the jewel of manhood, whatever that looks like, moment to moment to moment, in a way that's fully authentic. So we get to, in a way, remember that, and bring that to the table. So there's no more competition. It's not about who's doing it better. It's about what are you bringing? What are you bringing? What are you bringing? And it's looking at men as women as brothers also. And it's about women also looking at men as sisters. Because men get to develop their feminine, women get to develop their masculine, and it's no longer about gender roles. Although it can be, like, people can pick roles as much as they want. It becomes a choice, And when you have both an inner man and an inner woman fully
Mm-hmm.
developed, that's not just a
Mm-hmm.
teenager or a little child
Mm-hmm.
inside of you, then you get to bring that full awareness, that full maturity, and that full security to the table. And so I
Beautiful.
recommend that men develop themselves not as safe men, but as full men. In that fullness, will get to recognize, in that full awareness, get to recognize what's dangerous and what part of them is dangerous because they haven't
Yes.
fully matured that part yet.
Yes.
And when that part is fully mature, it will know how to engage best in the ecology of masculine and feminine that's out there.
Oh, this is only a retreat for men.
Yeah, it is. Although, it might evolve at some point. I mean, so ISTA, which
Yeah.
I imagine you know about.
Mm-hmm.
ISTA stands for International School of Temple Arts. You can go to ista.life and find out about the retreats, just for people who are curious.
Yeah.
So ISTA does a retreat called the Level 1, which is
Mm-hmm.
really about personal development and healing and sovereignty, self-responsibility and sovereignty. So that's the big sort of lines in it.
Yeah.
And within that, it supports both men and women in developing their inner man and their inner woman, and also healing their inner masculine and their inner feminine. And in the Level 1, you get to experience your men get to experience themselves as sisters, and men get to
Yes.
experience themselves as brothers.
Gorgeous.
And as a result, really begin the trajectory, if they haven't already, to develop that part of them as a distinct part that can then be reintegrated. And it's beautiful. So it's really good work. And so that's one way that you can be a woman with the brothers.
Yes.
For example.
Yeah, I love that.
And vice versa. So and for the brotherhood journey, maybe one day.
Yeah.
But at the moment, as we're focusing on men in male bodies, or who have been socialized as men.
Right.
And so that could change eventually, and we might actually open it up in different ways as the program unfolds, or create something else.
What's the main healing that you think men need that maybe also sparked this retreat?
Well, I think men need to find their own way in a society that tells them that the old ways are bad.
Yeah.
And the new ways are unknown.
Yeah.
Like you sit in the middle, like, what do I do? How what's it like to be a man? So we go deeply into the question of what's it like to be a man? What's it like to be a man for you?
Yes.
How are there parts of you that are, and so we do shadow work. Are there parts of you that are not on the table? Are there parts of you that is there ways that you relate to women that indicate the parts of you that are not fully mature yet?
Yeah.
Is there, do you know how to be in an intimate setting with men that doesn't look or doesn't sound like sex? Is it possible to reestablish the sweetness that you can have with other men by just holding each other? Very, very simple things that allow us to reconnect to our heart, to our sex, to our and to our shadows, because our shadows are not going anywhere. No. They're present. And by shadows, I mean everything that's unaware, immature, or insecure inside of you that's not really on the table for you to see. It's somewhere in your blind spots. Other people see it sometimes. Other people see it as their own shadows too, which is tricky. And so it takes practice, and it takes men coming together in order to learn this, at least in some ways. And I think the presence of women as brothers is also really powerful. It was some of the most, like, for me to look at a woman, to look at you and be like, oh, you're a brother. It just changed. Like, I could, if I can see that, then I engage with you in a way that is, in a way more genuine.
Yeah, I love that. Seeing your women as brothers and your men as sisters. I love that. That's right. Beautiful. Okay. Philippe, thank you so much for this. If people want to find out more about you, so you already spoke about your retreat, where can people find you?
Yeah. Okay, so for both ISTA and Remember, you can go to my website, www.exquisite.love, because they have .love extensions now, or you can go to www.remen, so men is the word, rememberjourney.com, and you'll find everything that we just talked about. There's a lot of information about attachment theory.
Yes.
There's a lot of blog posts around many of the things I've talked about. We haven't talked about men in leadership, but I've done some postings about that.
Right.
If you find me on Facebook, there's a Facebook link on my website, and you can find me on Facebook. We also haven't talked about how I really support sovereignty in the political landscape. And yeah, I support people in finding their own way.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in the political landscape, there's a lot of tactics from all sides trying to convince and manipulate, and it's been really saddening for me to witness that. And I've been very vocal about everybody getting to pick and choose how they're going to go about their belief system and their morality. So morality is a whole other topic that is more of my sort of pet project, pet peeve, whatever you want to call it, that I speak most about on Facebook. But really, it's about underlying that is about sovereignty. It's about like I want everybody I want everyone to get to choose, and that choosing trajectory is the trajectory of sovereignty. You know, it's you being able to be ready, willing, and able, and informed in order to make the choice that works best for you.
There's so much beauty in sovereignty, because sovereignty really says, like, I know who I am. I know how to take care of myself. I know how to create that for myself. I have boundaries. I know how to install them. You know, it's really the inner parent that finally is completely online. Like, sovereignty is such a deeply important subject.
That's right. Yeah, for me, sovereignty. I know a couple of other versions of sovereignty. One of them is you have a deep internally. There's a deep relationship between you and your inner child, and also in all parts of you. Essentially, one way is just your mature self and your inner child are in deep relationship, and it's a good, solid, mature, secure relationship, even though parts of you is more of an inner child.
Right.
But eventually, it becomes more integrated, and then you don't feel inside of you, or people don't feel like there's a schism anywhere. That's one version. Another version is you're self-responsible, fully self-responsible. Including your words, your actions, and feelings. Nobody else is. And you're also able to be responsible for others. Because you're already self-responsible, you can actually turn around and say, can I help? But they get to choose how they want to be helped. You don't get to tell them, which is tricky when you think you know better, right? And then that could cause a codependent relationship where you're the rescuer and they're the victim. And then the third level first level of relationship is self-responsibility. Second level is being responsible for others. Third level, which should be close to the second, but I think it's better if you're good at the first two before you get to the third one, which is being fully responsible with how you receive somebody else being responsible for you.
Truth bombs.
And that's what I was telling you earlier when we were talking about, can you be responsible as a receiver? So this is being responsible. So being responsible for yourself, being responsible for how you are as a giver, and being responsible for how you are as a receiver. Can you facilitate and support this person in supporting you? That's high level.
For people who are interested in this, I'm sure that's also what you're referring to, the Cartman drama triangle.
That's right.
It's it's such a simple thing. Really go look it up if you don't know what that is. For me, it flipped so many of my interactions upside down, because I realized I was creating inequality in so many of my even things that I thought were good. And to actually go to a sovereign state, like, hey, I can help you if you want me to, but I'm not going to impose my help on you. I'm not going to save you. That's you. And you are a sovereign adult, and I'm going to treat you as one. And this for me,
go ahead.
For me, that revolutionized also how I was relating, because I was always trying to emotionally save my men, because I had this narrative stuck that men are emotionally not as mature, and you have to help them a bit. So I was with all my previous partners, I would constantly be like, how are you feeling? What's going on? What are you doing? I saw something happen there. What's happening? I don't do it anymore, because I assume that he's a sovereign adult, and if he needs something, he's going to come to me. And that means that he has to do it, because I'm not doing it.
Right. And you could suggest it. You could offer it. Of course. As a full offering, as a gift. And the difference between a gift and a gift is something that doesn't need to be reciprocated. Like, here's my gift. Obviously you're operating from your own biases or your own sense of what's right, what's wrong. And you want to offer it in a way that does not force the other person, that allows them to come into their own at their pace, within their boundaries, and also following the desires. So so we're back at ready,
Yes.
willing, able, and informed.
Yes.
So you can do the information. You can say, "Hey, I can help," and it's okay if you don't want it. It's no big deal. Like
Yeah.
I think I
Yes.
got this. I might be wrong,
Yeah.
and I want to help. And
Yeah.
and creating the possibility of we could be interdependent in this way,
Yeah.
where we're not codependent. I don't have to do it. You don't have to receive it.
Yeah.
But I love the possibility in deep relating. I love the possibility of us being related in the ways that we need each other.
Oh.
That's a beautiful way.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful when it's done well. When it's done in codependency, it's not so good.
In codependency, there's fear. It's fear.
There's
it's fear and power.
And there's not as much choice.
Yeah, exactly.
All interactions in a drama triangle are codependent. They need the roles in order to work. But outside of that, you know the difference between a codependent versus an interdependent relating by the amount of choice there is present.
Yes.
If you can't say no anymore, then there's codependency present.
Oh, I love that. Because I do this also. My masculine and feminine, all I'm talking about is that you want to cultivate choice. I'm not telling you need to be feminine. I'm not telling you need to be masculine. Cultivate choice. Mature yourself in both, and then feel what it is that you need today.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are. We can talk for another hour, I'm sure.
We should do it again.
We should do this again. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your knowledge, your I really, really appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
You have inspired me. I've learned so much from you already. Wow.
Thank you for your really insightful questions. Thanks for your presence. Thanks for your desire to dive into this. Thanks for your invitation. It's such a pleasure getting to know you this way and getting to and because you're a good friend of Amanda, it's also really beautiful to see. Now I know you better, and now I know her, and I can see how you guys are co-creating, and I can see the alchemy that's going to happen there.
There's for sure. There's a polarity between me and her. It's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you so much, Philippe. Thank you. I appreciate this so much. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Yeah, you too.